Hello, my dear friends. Today, I'd like to talk about the X2x2s. So these are the people, of course, who are no longer 2x2s. Now, there's a very large spectrum of X2x2 experiences and reasons why someone would become an X2x2 and so forth. I mean, it runs the gamut, right? So let's just say that you could have people who were born and raised in 2x2s and they left. They left when they left home, for example, or they left in their 20s or 30s, or they left in their 50s, or they were pushed out by the 2x2 ministry at some point. There's all sorts of those. Then there are people who joined the 2x2s as a convert. Now, there's very few converts, admittedly, but they joined as a convert and they left, right? Usually those types of people get pushed out or leave, of course. Usually they're adults, right? Very few people who would join as a child as a convert. I don't think that even exists. And then there's also people who became 2x2 ministers and went from being a 2x2 minister to no longer being a 2x2 minister and no longer being a 2x2. Maybe it happened all at the same time, or it was drawn out over a couple of years. But that's pretty extreme, right? Go from a minister to no longer being a 2x2. That's very extreme. You'd think um, it, that wouldn't happen, but of course, that happens a lot to people who are 2x2 ministers end up leaving it, who leave the ministry. A lot of them don't become they end the 2x2 business altogether. So we've got a whole different spectrum of experiences and why people would leave, right? Either voluntarily or involuntarily. I know. I just want to talk though today about what happens to these people. So that's why I'm talking about X2x2s. What happens to them after they leave the 2x2 organization? Okay, so I think there are two major groups that we could, in generalized terms here, speak of when we speak about X2x2s. So the first group, which I think if you go online in public forums, you'll see this as being the dominant group, meaning that most of them, most common, is or what we call like the non-believers or the non-churched or the atheists or agnostics. Okay. Now you'd think this is pretty strange that someone who was a 2x2, which is an exclusivist, fundamentalist, anti-liturgical, anti-sacramentalist sect, it's a cult in with its all different in a cult, to go from that to straight up atheism or non-believer, right? That's a pretty big leap, right? So how could that ever happen? But like I said, in these public forums of X2x2s, you'll see this is a very common thing. Now, the general case, I think, with these people is that it's a case of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Because during their experience with 2x2s, they have been convinced that 2x2ism is the most perfect expression of Christianity, meaning that every other Christian denomination is deficient in the key aspects of what it means to be a Christian. And 2x2ism is the ultimate pinnacle of perfection in this. And therefore, if something happens or they end up leaving the 2x2s, either voluntarily or involuntarily, they would just not go to any other Christian denomination. It's either 2x2ism or zero, right? One or nothing. Very binary choice. But that's what happens. Or in sort of related is that they see 2x2ism again as a typical expression of Christianity, meaning like everything they know about Christianity through the lens of a 2x2 means that that's what Christianity is. Okay, so they don't understand that 2x2ism is an extreme aberration. Has really, in many ways, I've argued it's not even Christian, but these people believe that since they interpret Christianity as being equivalent to 2x2ism, and therefore they reject 2x2ism, and therefore they reject Christianity. Okay, now some of them will go toy around with other world religions, Buddhism, things like that, but but most of them just go straight to atheism, or there's other variants. They're spiritual but not religious, which means like they'll dabble in all kinds of new age things, which is actually not surprising because there's a lot of 2x2s who are very new age in their thinking about spirits and crystals and stuff like this, and essential oils they use they think have special magical powers and things like this. So that's not actually not such a far leap in some regards, even though it's very strange, you'd think. But yeah, this group, let's call them the atheist camp of the X2x2s, is big, and these people are also very, very angry about their 2x2 experience. Now that there's reasons to be angry, but they take that anger and they project it onto Christianity in general. And when you get in conversations with them, you'll find out that they really know very little about Christianity. In fact, they can't even make the distinctions between the different forms of it, right? So again, what are some of the major forms? Well, we have the fundamentalist group, who are like 5% of the world's Christians, are totally fringe troglodyte group, anti-intellectual group. Well, that's who 2x2s are. But these atheists think that fundamentalism is Christianity. I mean, that's like saying that ISIS is Islam. I mean, it's not really, right? Or that ultra-Orthodox Jews is all Judaism. I mean, not really, is it? I mean, and certainly in the history of Christianity, fundamentalists, they've come on the scene very recently. They haven't been around for long, and they are very particularly the United States. They're very much an American invention, and they're for people who are essentially uneducated people, right? Peasants, and therefore to pretend that Christianity and fundamentalism are equivalent is totally wrong. But that's what these atheists are doing. These X2x2 atheists. Now, they don't even recognize also that 2x2ism is a Calvinist, right? In a sense that it's anti-liturgical, right? And so they don't understand that the vast majority of the world's Christians are not Calvinists, right? I think it's more than 75% of the world's Christians are not Calvinists, that are actually liturgical, right? But let me give you this example. When you interact with these atheists, they've got obviously a lot of bad things to say about Christian 2x2s. They also may have some bad things to say about fundamentalists, or they just call it Christians in general. They can't distinguish. And they also, if they're talking about Christians in general, they will use the Catholic Church. That's their great example of something that's done, obviously, the most harm of any group in the world, of course, according to them. But if you ask them, well, can you tell me more about Lutherans, which are a very large group, or Anglicans? Anglicans are the third largest denomination in the world. So you'd think they would know something about this group. They don't. Or how about Orthodox, right? Eastern Orthodox or Oriental Orthodox. They know nothing about this group either. That's the second largest denomination, by the way. They have no idea. They can't tell you much about or anything. They don't even know the names usually. And they have nothing bad to say about them because they don't know anything. All they know is Roman Catholic is bad. I mean, really, when you pick up like why are they got such a anger about Roman Catholics, it's because of their training as a 2x2. Because 2x2ism uses Roman Catholic Church as a foil, meaning that everything the Roman Catholic Church does is bad, and we are against it. And that's no surprise. 2x2ism started in Northern Ireland, right, as a very extreme Protestant sect in Northern Ireland. So it totally is expected that this would be part of the 2x2 culture. So these atheists, they who are X2x2s, they're really in a bad situation because they lose their 2x2 social network, and they're unable to create new social networks of any stability in their lives. And they have no moral training other than what they receive in 2xism, which is not a very good moral training. And these are people who are not getting interested in Aristotelian ethics. They're not studying Stoicism, right? Nothing like this. They have no real moral foundations, no moral codes, other than what they've kind of picked up from the general society they live in, right? And so they become basically hedonists in that regard, right? Whatever feels good, do it, and such. Their lives turn into real disasters. I have gone in some of these forums and talked with some of these people, and we've got all kinds of sexual deviance going on. Furries, people who dress up in fursuits to have sex with each other. That's actually a pretty common thing among some of these. It's unbelievable. You'd think, wow, that's quite a big leap from being a 2x2, but yeah, that's what kind of stuff I get into. Drugs. I mean, the drug use amongst these people it's almost ubiquitous. Illegal and illegal drugs, very high rates. It's very sad. These people are very confused and very angry, and so forth. And so my recommendation to anybody who's considering leaving 2x2ism or gets pushed out is to, like, under no condition should you go down this atheism path. First of all, the reasons for you to be an atheist that you concocted in your head are all wrong, because you don't really understand the arguments at all. You've got it totally confused, and you're untrained in the logic around atheism. I mean, it's a very complicated topic. So don't go down this. But anyways, the second largest camp or second other general group of X2x2s are what I call fundamentalists. These are people who they're upset about something particular about 2x2, something exclusivity of it, or whatever, divorce and remarriage issues 2x2s are hammering on about, or maybe they get pushed out, but for whatever reason. But these people still want to be Christians. They're still hard into Christianity, and they look and find a variant of Christianity that looks and feels as similar to 2x2ism as possible. Now, they're probably not doing that consciously, but it's happening. And they get into other fundamentalist groups. But here's one of the worst tricks that happens to them. They have a hate on for organized religion. Now, of course, this is again part of 2x2 culture is 2x2s don't consider themselves not to be a church. They're a fellowship, and they hate churches because, of course, Jesus didn't found a church, as you know, as according to them, and therefore they don't want to be involved with any denominations, right? So when they see here of these non-denominational churches, that's a big selling point for them, and they go right for it. They don't understand that many, if not the vast majority of these non-denominational churches are actually fundamentalists and or Pentecostals. Okay. In fact, if you take all the non-denominational Pentecostals and add them up in the United States and consider them as one Pentecostal group, I believe it's like the second largest or third largest group in the United States. Pretty crazy, right? So that's and so what I'm pointing out is that these non-doms churches are everywhere, and they look and feel very similar to 2x2ism in terms of the general belief structure. And so a lot of 2x2s, when they leave 2x2ism, they go into these, well, they're fundamentalist and or Pentecostal churches. And well, what happens? Is it a great improvement for them? I mean, it's a marginal improvement in the sense that they're not exclusivists anymore, but they still are in the fringes of Christianity, right? They're still in the less than 5% of the total world population of Christians. It's pretty bad. So it also, if you haven't ever explored the Pentecostal non-dom world of churches in the United States, it's worth knowing that it also is an anti-intellectual group. I mean, these are the kind of things where many of the pastors have little to no training, right? Except they're charismatic, right? In terms of they're good salesmen. That's basically the only criterion. This should come as no surprise. American Protestantism, the kind that you commonly see on TV and so forth, is a huckster operation. Okay? If you really want to be a Protestant, choose one of the actual legitimate Protestant groups, which are Anglicans and Lutherans. and Dutch Reform. That's basically the three that have a actual credible intellectual body behind them. There are all these other ones that have popped up all over the United States. These are huckster operations, and that's why 2x2s get sucked into them, because 2x2s themselves are in a huckster operation. That's what 2x2ism is. It's an absolute huckster outfit. It's ripping people off, lying to them, and that's so it's no surprise that when people leave that, they still are so confused about what Christianity is. They grab a hold of other huckster operations, right? They'll believe anything that makes them feel in the moment good, right? Accepted, something like that. They actually are very little interest in finding out the intellectual structure of it. So it's very sad, like I said. So you got these ones who are fundamentalists coming out of 2x2s, and that's where they stop, basically. And you got other ones with the atheists who reject fundamentalism basically because they can't imagine that the earth was created 8,000 years ago and that Adam and Eve were real and all this other stuff. Well, of course, they have a legitimate point. Those are absolutely crazy ideas, right? So, but again, it's a straw man argument. Like legitimate Christians, like Catholics, like Anglicans, like Lutherans, like Orthodox, they don't believe any of this fundamentalism nonsense. So if 2x2s, when they leave 2x2ism, the most important thing for them to do is to actually go into these legitimate Christian denominations, right? Orthodox, Roman Catholic, Anglican, Lutheran, Dutch Reform. You go in there, you're going to get a good education about what Christianity is. And you should know why do these denominations that I just mentioned, why are they actually denominations? Why aren't they all considered one? Well, they were all one at a certain point in history. Actually, the Roman Catholics and the Orthodox, they split in the 11th century. Before that, there was only one church, was called the Universal Church. And the word Catholic means universal. Obviously, the Roman Catholic is the Latin side of it. The Orthodox was the ones from the East, right? With the Greek speaking, the North Africa, and the Levant area. They just continued on. It was actually the Roman Catholics split from the Orthodox, so to speak. And why? It was really a geopolitical thing. It really had nothing to do with any doctrine. They made up some doctrine reasons to cover for it. Well, the same thing happened during the Reformation. Luther, he didn't want to start a new church, new denomination. He just wanted some reforms, and so did many other people. And those reforms actually were enacted during the Council of Trent. It was called the Counter-Reformation. The issue was there was some German princes in North Germany who wanted to break free of the Holy Roman Empire, or basically from Austria, and they wanted to stop paying taxes to them. They wanted to create their own independent realm. And so they said, well, we in order to do that, we need to have our own churches, we have to separate. So they financed Luther. I mean, Luther was a Franciscan. I think it was sorry, he was an Augustinian monk or theologian, actually, right? And he made these critiques of the Roman Catholic Church, and then subsequently got financed by these German princes, and ended up setting up this Lutheran church in northern Germany. Okay, and there were other groups like in Sweden that set up their own version, which was the Church of Sweden, but it's just the same thing, Lutheranism, right? And the same thing happened in England. England wanted to separate from basically from Spain and from France, because those are the two countries that were controlling the Pope at different, like a ping pong table, basically, the two of them, different times. And England wanted to be an independent country, basically, functionally independent. So it wanted its own kind of church structure. Which, by the way, Venice was actually, well, it's still Roman Catholic. Venice was functionally independent of Rome. Well, that's what England wanted, and England was unable to get it because the Pope at that time was controlled by Spain, and so England set up their own church, right, with no longer having the Pope at the head of it. It's basically, it was the exact same church as it was before. It just now had the King of England at the head, right? And that's why you got Anglicanism. If you go and study Anglicanism, there's very little difference between it and Lutheranism and Roman Catholicism. and frankly, even Orthodox. These denominations are very, very similar, and that's why we call them the liturgical denominations. And these are the dominant denominations in the world. All these other ones where you run into that you think are just equivalent, they're not. These ones are the huckster operations that are come out mostly in the United States. All right, so if you're a 2x2, I'm counseling you to avoid huckster operations. And I'm also counseling you in the early part of this podcast to avoid going down this atheist, agnostic, spiritual, but not religious path. It's no good for you either. If you can come to the real argument that you're an atheist in a very sophisticated way, basically like Descartes, that's fine. But you don't have the mind of Descartes. You're not as smart as Descartes. Okay? And there's a lot of pitfalls that come for people who are atheists. It's very, very difficult to be in because you need a moral structure as well. And I don't know too many of you that have the capability to understand Stoicism and then to apply it in your life consistently. Very few people have that capability. I'm pretty sure that no one that I know has that capability, including myself. And that is why it's very important to be in a denomination which enforces or facilitates rather these types of moral doctrines so that you can live a life that is good for you, makes you not a slave to your passions, makes you free. Any questions, please send them.